Hey, fearless friends, it's Amy Schmidt, and welcome to another episode of the Fearlessly Facing 50 and Beyond podcast. We've got a great guest in store for you today. I just want to remind you, don't forget to check out the website, fearlesslyfacing50.com, F-I-F-T-Y. And you know what? You can follow me on all the socials, theamy.schmidt and fearlesslyfacing50_ the F word series. That's what we're into right now is the F word series. Yep, you got it. All those F words we face as we age. Today's guest is Margaret White. She is an inspiration in so many ways. If you are someone that has been dictated by your calendar, maybe you roll out of bed and the first thing you do is check your socials, check your emails, and you have a to-do list that is overflowing, this is an episode for you. We're going to be talking about fearlessly finding time in our busy schedules. So stay tuned for my episode with Margaret White. Hey, fearless friends. Well, you heard in the intro, this is going to be another great conversation. I'm excited about this show. And, before I even get started today, I want to say, I don't have really coaches on my show. I have to be honest. I really, in all of the years of doing it, I haven't had many coaches on because for no other reason than that I get a lot of pitches from coaches. And I think they do a wonderful job. And I want to preface this by saying I met Margaret. I met Margaret just recently. And it's so funny because when you meet somebody and you find this instant, not only inspiration, but just a desire to learn more, a curiosity about a person. And that's exactly what Margaret White has brought into my life. So welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. Such an honor to be here.
I'm just excited to have you here. And you know what? It's funny because we've now been together like 4 days in the last 7.
Yeah. It's been 4 out of 7.
It's been 4 out of 7. So that's pretty good odds. It's just really interesting how, we are both believers and we're both strong Christian women. And that's really a part of who we are. And it's at the core of what we do.
Right.
And I think when you meet somebody and you share these values and just similarities in so many ways, it's so fun. And that's when the magic happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I feel that connection too.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
So, and maybe we'll go to Italy together.
Maybe. I'm doing a breakthrough retreat over there this fall. You're more than welcome.
Exactly. Prego. Like I would like to do the whole thing. I think it sounds amazing. So, I said in the intro a little bit about 6 words: live authentically, love abundantly, and thrive unimaginably. Mm-hmm. Those are powerful words, and they're words that you really are behind. So let's walk through those. What do those 6 words really mean to you?
Well, if I can go back just a little bit,
absolutely,
to tell a little bit of my story.
Yeah.
Years ago, I've always been an overachiever, high achieving,
me too,
self-proclaimed.
Perfectionist?
Right? Total perfectionist.
Oh yeah, I'm recovering with that. I say that often. Yes.
Always recovering. And now helping other women to recover is what I'm trying to do.
Yep.
I found myself in a space of really knowing I was doing everything according to everybody else's checklist.
Mm.
If you were to look at my life, you would think it would be so successful. There would be such happiness and such joy because I had checked everything off the list.
Right.
The marriage, the amazing career, the promotions, trips to Caribbean, the Europe, the big house, all of the things that by society tells us that's what you need.
You're doing everything right.
You're doing everything right. But I had this epiphany years ago, just when I was exhausted, overwhelmed. Burning the candle at both ends didn't even sum up my life. It was even more dramatically worse than that, as far as just the amount of time, effort, and energy I spent in work. Work-ends were weekends became work-ends.
Yeah.
And I really had that epiphany one day that this is not the life that God intended for me.
Right.
And something was so off. And I felt it in my core. And I had to take a pattern disrupt for myself from my life to break away. And I actually took a vacation by myself.
Well, there's power in that.
There is absolute power in disconnecting to reconnect with yourself.
Right.
Breaking away to break through.
Yeah.
And what I realized was that while I was filling my life, what was missing was this soul-aligned fulfillment.
Mm.
And
wow, I'm sure that's hitting a chord with a lot of people right now.
yeah. And I've really worked over the last years in my own personal transformation to make sure that what I'm doing and what's on my calendar, where I'm putting my effort and energy is really in alignment with what I'm divinely meant for.
Yeah.
And, I've made a lot of decisions over the last years. I retired early, for example, which if you would have said in 2019, I would have retired early, I would have thought you were crazy because I thought I was going to be working till at least 55, et cetera, in the career that I was in at the time. But I made a decision that was soul aligned to care for my mother in her time of need. Yeah, in her time of need. Dementia bordering on Alzheimer's, other medical issues that were pressing, not enough leave time that I could ever take off to do what I needed to do for her.
Right.
And I made that choice to be present for her. And it was one of the best decisions that I made because it was soul aligned.
Mm.
And I just use that as one of the many examples in my last years. But when I talk about living authentically, what's your truth?
Right.
We all, I believe, have a divine imprint, one that God has placed within us. And it's up to us to try to listen and to hear that whisper as to what that is.
Right.
I worked so much over the last years on fine-tuning my intuition.
That's another powerful thing.
Absolutely powerful.
Yeah.
One of my favorite quotes by Florence Scovel Shinn goes like this: prayer is us phoning God. Intuition is God phoning us. But so many of us don't take that time to be still.
Right. Well, listen. What's in listen? Silence.
Right.
Being silent and listening. Right. And sometimes you hear things or you listen to things you really don't want to hear.
Yeah.
And that probably was that moment for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I had Annie Mayfield on a few weeks ago, who is just a rock star. She's a young woman and she's just on fire for life, for God, for everything and everything that she does. But she said to me, I was addicted to achievement.
Yeah.
And that just was like, I think a lot of us are addicted to achievement. And once we get that goal, that achievement, then it's like, okay, now I'm on to something else because that's not good enough. I got to do something else. So in that silence, in that stillness that you had, you found this epiphany of who you really are.
Yeah.
And what you're meant for.
And I started aligning my life and my choices with that.
Walk me through aligning. It's a strong word. It's a word that's being used a lot, alignment. Walk me through what that means for you. Can you define it?
Well, alignment really comes down to how you're choosing.
True.
And a lot of people don't realize that.
That's a simple definition.
Very
Because
simple.
You think it's going to be some Webster Dictionary, long, drawn out thing.
Right. And you think that all of a sudden one day you're like, I'm aligned.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the choices that you're making in your life.
Right.
Because if you're not aligning your daily choices with what you value,
right,
with what is soul aligned to you, it's just like when I talk to women, some women are afraid to say no.
I was just going to say.
No is as sacred of a choice as yes is.
Yes, you're right.
And we need to honor that.
So you were never saying no before.
I was never saying no.
Right. It was sure, I'll do it. Yeah, Margaret will do it. You're like,
right.
Didn't I say it was like Mikey and the Life commercial? Remember?
Yes.
Mikey will do it. He'll do anything. That was Amy too. Amy will do it.
Yeah.
And there's still an element of that I see in myself. Like, oh, all right, I can do that. But I am learning to step into no as a complete sentence.
Right.
And simply saying, with no apology, simply saying, I'm at capacity. Thank you for thinking of me. I appreciate it. Not right now.
Exactly. And sometimes you need to realize it might be someone else's place to step in there where you have to say no.
Yeah.
And that gives someone else an opportunity.
Right.
In
That's true.
You keeping a door closed, it might allow another person to rise.
That's true. That's true.
And we don't often think of it that way. So alignment really is about choosing.
It's about choosing. Wow. I bet that's got a lot of people thinking. When I met Margaret, we were talking, I think it was last week, and Margaret's a big tennis player. And of course, now we're in Florida. So there's a lot of time to play tennis in this beautiful sunshine. And And you said to me, you know what? No, that's you've kind of blocked your time. I might not be using the correct word, but you were very open and transparent about the fact, no, that's when I'm playing tennis. That's when I'm doing this. And those were treating yourself like a guest of honor. You were doing something for you.
Mm-hmm. And I believe we all need to.
Yeah.
You know,
well, you were taking years off your life, as was I, when we're saying yes to everything.
Yes, you absolutely do. And the thing is, and here's the other thing, people always talk about wanting to find that balance. I'm going to challenge the myth of that because I chased it for years.
Right.
As many women do. But guess what? I've never really ever found anybody that got there.
Mm.
And here's why. Because we treat balance, when you think of balance, it's like equilibrium. It's like assuming all
beam.
parts, well, not just a balance beam. Imagine a tightrope.
Oh, right. Yeah.
With that pole, trying to balance everything. There's
picture Phil
tension
on Modern Family.
Uh-huh,
He was like 2 feet off the ground. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
I'm there.
So there's tension.
Yeah.
There's fear.
Right.
There's trying to move forward, but having to do it so slowly. And to me, one of the things that I've realized is that life is about harmony. And harmony is a dance.
Mm.
And sometimes it's a super fast, fun dance, super fast, exerting dance. Sometimes it's slow and sweet.
Yeah.
And then it's everything in between. And if you can begin to view life as seeking harmony versus balance, you're going to be so much happier because balance is elusive. You're really never going to get there.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. Wow. See, this is why I brought Margaret on the show. She's amazing. You're very thoughtful and contemplative with your words too, which I really like.
Thank you.
Margaret was part of a panel, just an event we were in together, and you talked a lot about overachieving, these whole things about overs. Mm-hmm. And I love that you talk about that. And that's your thing. Yeah. This is Margaret's thing. So nobody take the overs because this is her thing. And I think it's so cool because overgiving, overserving, over all of that. Mm-hmm. When really what we should be doing is
we need to be in overflow.
Overflow.
Yeah. That's the only over we should be in.
Right. And I picture that as, that saying that goes around that says you can't pour from an empty cup. Correct. And, you fill it up because you have to have it actually going over the sides onto the little saucer so you're serving others as well. Is that kind of what that means?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We never pour into ourselves as women at times. We get stuck in the overs. And what I want to help women with is I want a movement of getting over the overs.
Yeah.
Feeling like
I'm in.
We need to be overachieving, over-striving, over-functioning, over-compensating, over-apologizing, over-promising, over-committing. I could go on.
Yeah. How many women are going, oh man, she's hitting a nerve right now.
And how many others could we add to that list that I didn't even mention?
So many.
Right?
Stuck in the overs.
But what we realize, we were never intended or created to work from depletion.
Right.
We were created to be poured into so that we could then give of our gifts, time, and talent to others. Yeah. And working from depletion, you will never get as much out of that as you will in working from overflow.
Very
overflow
true.
Is where it's at.
Overflow. I like it.
And again, overflow actually taps into alignment.
Yeah, it does.
Because if you're choosing things, you use the tennis example. For me, I love time with my friends,
right?
And I combine fitness with it.
Yeah.
So that's some sacred time that I schedule to pour into myself.
Yes.
Because friendships, fun, and fitness fuels me.
Yeah.
So how do you do that for yourself?
A lot of F words right there. I love that. That's
what
we talk about.
I love your F words.
I love my F words. I want you to take me to that moment. And I know this is personal. So, you go as deep in as you want. But I know my moment. And I've shared it before, but I'd love to hear your moment when you thought, I can't do this anymore. Was it anxiety? Was it just sadness? Was it just, depletion? Yes, you were depleted, but take me to that time when you just said, Eat, Pray, Love, that book years ago where she was on the bathroom floor and all of that. Did you have one of those moments?
Yeah, mine was actually looking in the bathroom mirror one morning.
Really?
Waking up one morning. And, I can't even recall everything that had happened because life was a blur back then, to be very honest, of just event after event.
You were dictated by your schedule.
Everything,
Were you married at that point?
I was married at that point. And that could be a whole other podcast topic.
Exactly.
Because I was in a marriage that I stayed in where I wasn't valued as I should have been.
Mm.
And, again, overcompensating, overfunctioning, over apologizing, back in those overs. And I woke up and I realized, honestly, that my life was just not as fulfilling as it should be. I was not as inspired as I should be. And while I loved my work, don't get me wrong, I worked with some of the most amazing people.
So successful.
And we did amazing work together for kids, for the families, for the community. And I'm so proud of that work. But at the end of the day, I was run into the ground and I was exhausted trying to be everything for everyone. And not just in one corner of my life, in all of them. And I actually, that day, made a decision. This is how I ended up on that breakaway by myself. I canceled my husband out of our vacation, and I went by myself for 2 weeks down to the Caribbean.
Wow.
Yes.
It's your moment.
That was my moment. And I sat on a beach, and I remember...
Did you feel lonely?
No. I started to feel expansive.
Were you nervous?
No. I started to come back to myself because the only person I could hear in my head was me and God.
Right.
And I had not given myself that chance or opportunity to be still. I couldn't remember the last time. I was on go.
You had to be with yourself. I said this recently, and I mentioned it in my book, the fact that a good friend of mine, I had 3 very busy life and I was involved in everything. I was a stay-at-home mom at this point, traveling here and there with my kids, and my husband was gone 3 nights a week. And a friend of mine said, your Honda Odyssey, your minivan, is never in the driveway. Mm-hmm. You're always doing something. You're always busy. What are you doing? Like committee meetings and this. I was so overextended. There's another over. That I wrote in the book that I wondered if at that point in my life, I was just like a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
Because if I actually was silent and still with myself, would I actually like myself?
Mm-hmm. That's a question a lot of women ask themselves.
Yeah.
They're scared to slow down.
Right.
Because they're afraid
what are they gonna see?
Not only that, but they're also afraid externally what other people will think about it.
Right.
External validation.
Yes.
For people that are the overachievers, the high-performing, ambitious women, that plays a huge part in it as well.
It's not the comparison trap. It's more of the self-worth, the validation part of it.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you're sitting on a beach.
Yep.
And maybe having a margarita or 2, I hope.
Perhaps.
Pina colada, whatever. And you're just, I think in those moments of stillness, you really do uncover and rediscover things about yourself.
Yeah. And I'll never forget, and I actually use this quote on my website because I just love it, by Anise Nin.
Yes.
I was reading a book, and it happened to be at the top of one of the chapters. And I can't even remember what the book was.
Right.
But the quote, the risk to remain tight in the bud may be greater than the risk to blossom. And I was staying tight in my bud.
Wow.
With what I knew. Yeah. And I just remember looking at that, and I must have reread it 20 different times.
Yeah.
And tears just came streaming down my face.
Yeah.
Because at that moment, and I'm sitting literally in the water, partially in a chair on this beach where there were only 2 or 3 other people. And all I feel are these waves washing over me. And I just knew at that moment that I was meant for something totally different in my life.
Yeah.
And it was time for me to start making choices that aligned with me.
Were you surprised that your husband, did he not show up that whole time? Like he didn't come and join you or anything?
I told him not to.
Okay. Yeah.
I made it explicitly
You made it clear.
I made it clear. I needed that time for me.
That's big.
Well, and it was at that juncture that I actually decided I needed to ask for a divorce.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was part of the moving forward.
Yeah, the moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure so many women listening are like, I can relate to a lot of what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
So many aspects of it, so many layers to peel back. Let's talk about, your work life. I mean, you had this enormous career.
Mm-hmm.
You had a team. I mean, Margaret's a leader. So, building people up, building teams, leadership development, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any colleagues of yours, male or female, that were like, Margaret, you're working too hard. Like, take a break. Did you ever get that? Were you just so on top of your game all the time that nobody thought you needed anything?
Well, here's what's interesting. So a lot of the people I was surrounded with, and especially the women, they were in the same place I was in so many ways. And so there was just an expectation that you're at this level. I basically was on call 24/7 since I was 27.
Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. As a school leader and then a district leader, and you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
And when. So that was part of the culture.
Yeah.
And it was just accepted.
It was just expected and accepted.
Right. Correct.
Wow.
And, I watch so many of the women, especially in that field, because education does have a ton of women in it. Let's just, the percentage is a lot higher there in that field.
Yeah.
They knew that, you're going to have to put in that work if you want that promotion. If
your trajectory's going here,
yeah.
You want that next job, yes.
Yeah. And it's like that in so many work cultures as well. And that's where I think that we do a disservice to ourselves at times.
Right.
So I either see, because of that culture, oftentimes I will see women playing it too small. They're really destined for something greater, but they're afraid what that greatness might bring into their life, or that it might disrupt something in their life.
Yeah.
Or they might face fear to go into it.
Right.
And then there are those that go into it wholeheartedly, and then they're just not quite sure how to find that harmony back in their life. Raising a family, making sure as you get older, your own parents are cared for as you need them to
Our
be.
generation. We're the same age.
Right.
My parents have both passed, but we're caring for, aging parents.
Yep.
It's a tough gig.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
I talked to a woman yesterday, India Martin. She's out of DC, and we were talking about some of the things that she's done. And she said, Amy, when people would come into me, women in my office, and talk about their jobs, it wasn't job stress. It was all of the other peripheral things that they were dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
The men that would come in my office were like, yeah, here's the deal. This is what I'm dealing with at work. There was no outside noise on that periphery. Whereas women, it was always, I'm dealing with menopause, or I'm dealing with something with one of my kids, or I'm dealing with my aging parents. We carry so much weight.
Mm-hmm. We do.
Yeah.
We constantly carry it because we don't give ourselves permission.
That's a big word. Do
you
like that word, permission? I always wonder about that word. Like, do we have to give ourselves permission?
If you don't, who will?
True. That's true.
And if you don't, what will you do differently?
And if you don't, what would you do differently?
If you don't give yourself permission.
Good reframe there.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because the thing is, we have to be able to give ourselves a pass, a permission slip per se, on some things.
Yes. You're right. Right.
And honestly,
it's a different way of looking at it.
What permission is?
Yeah, I do want to know.
It's grace.
Yeah. There you go.
Permission is grace.
Yeah.
And if God can give that to us, we can give it to ourselves.
We can give it to ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh, mic drop. See? Margaret White. Gotta love her. So you come back. We've only got a few minutes left, but you come back and going through a divorce, you're going through all that. You still have your job, I assume. You're still working. Did you ever have that moment, and I say this a lot, where you're just in bed and it's like, man, I just want to put those covers back over my head today because I just can't face it. I want you to walk me through. I'm sure you've had a day like that. For somebody listening that might be right there right now thinking, I don't know, I'm on this cul-de-sac and it just keeps going around. Give me a couple tangible takeaways for listeners that you help women in those situations.
Well, so first, let me say that, yes, I have had one of those moments, but that was really before I had the epiphany. Okay.
So you really haven't had that many since
I have really honed in on soul alignment. Like, there's a divine imprint in you. And when you find it, there becomes a fire in you that is unstoppable.
Yeah.
And
I can see that in you.
Yeah. Yeah. And so when I started making decisions that were aligned,
Mm.
my life started to free and open up right in front of me. And I continued to ask myself, and here's the beautiful thing, some of your greatest growth happens in the smallest of moments.
Right. I would agree with that.
And so asking yourself, what's my next inspired step that I can take? What's my next action that I can take? You might see where you are on the edge. You're looking way ahead to where you know you want to be, and you know that there's a great gap and a great chasm in between, that it feels so daunting, almost like trying to cross the Grand Canyon on a pogo stick.
There you go.
But the thing is, what's my next step?
Right.
And then my next. All of those small incremental steps add up like compound interest. And we
True.
know what can happen to a bank account over a couple years with compound interest.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to get stuck. And that's what I help women get up and out of.
Yeah.
That feeling of being stuck.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it starts
So
by
many are there.
taking inspired action.
Inspired action. And I love that about you.
Mhm.
And that's why I think I wanted to have you on too, because that's what it's about. It's about action,
Movement.
about movement.
Yeah.
I use that analogy of, my book is called Cannonball, and, standing on the top of that diving board when you were a kid, and just that fearless exhilaration of just going and cannonballing off, making that splash, and everybody's watching and being like, she's so cool.
Yeah.
And you're making sure everybody's watching you because you feel so cool and you want to do it again and again. And then we get to a point, wherever that is in our life, where we get stuck on that middle rung. And you're like, you know what? I'll do it. I'm sure you get a lot of women that'll say, okay, yeah, I'll start next year. When I have more money.
Yeah.
When I have more time.
Yeah.
When I'm 10 pounds slimmer. That's what we tell ourselves,
Right. We are great at self-sabotage, aren't we?
Yes, we are. We are.
And one of the first things that I have to work with women on through my personal revolution code is liberation. And that's liberating them from their limiting beliefs and their thoughts.
Right.
Their patterns and the stories and the narratives that they have that are inside of them, that are created from external sources, oftentimes before they're even 7. And then they seek validation for what they have found year after year after year.
Right.
They continue to look for those same things. So they believe them.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Ants, we call them ants, negative thoughts, a negative thought. And you want to stomp out those ants, you know, and how many negative thoughts we have in a day.
Right.
Have you done any research around men versus women on negative thoughts?
So I haven't specifically about negative thoughts. However, I have done some work with the women-centered coaching model, which is something that I specialize in as well. I've done some work with Claire Zammit with her team through that.
Cool.
And if I'm remembering correctly, the statistic is around 80% of women all hold limiting beliefs that they basically are repeating daily. Yeah. Yep. And it's astonishing that it's somewhere like 20% of men.
Yeah, I thought so.
It's the gap.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's there, and it's unbelievable. Yes.
I'm going to be linking everything about Margaret in the episode notes, so you can contact her. You work worldwide, countrywide, with women wherever. I highly encourage you to reach out to Margaret, and you will find the amazing woman, the gifts that she has, her ability to thoughtfully move you along your journey is wonderful. So I'll have all that in the episode notes. Couple of things. First of all, how are you fearlessly facing friends right now? Because I mean, listen, friendships are not easy. They come and go. They evolve. 60 seconds on how you're fearlessly facing friends.
So again, it comes down to me for that soul alignment. I would rather have 10 to 12 soul aligned friends where we have deep sisterhood and connection than 100 or 200 that are just surface level.
Yep. You're not a small talk girl. Me either.
No,
I always say that.
I'm not.
They always say if Amy were in a room, it's like you got a couch and you got people all around her and then you got Kleenex boxes because we go deep. We dig in.
We do.
It's not peripheral talk.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Fearlessly facing faith.
Faith. You know, you have to have some type of a routine for that. I firmly believe that. And that was something that was missing in my life. I always had deep faith. I would go to church. You know, I would do the practices, pray. I was a firm believer, but it wasn't a daily integration. And that shifted for me.
Yeah.
And I believe that, you have to change your spirit to where you are connecting with Source, with God on a daily basis.
Right.
And that for some could be a walk in nature, connecting, seeing all the miracles that are around every single day.
Yep.
Yep. At a red light.
Exactly.
Stopping to say a prayer.
Yes.
Reflecting on the day, saying, God, give me my next inspired step.
Right. So great.
Yeah.
It's like a sunset for us. My
Mhm.
husband and I always sit at the sunset every night. We always pause. Sunset's our thing. And what are the words you describe a sunset? Heavenly. You want this moment to last forever. Those moments of silence, stillness, all of that. Realigning, harmony, balance. I love it. You've hit on so many great things. Last question before we leave is, of course, the one I ask everybody. And that's, Margaret, if you're sitting on the couch and you look to your left, and there's Margaret at age 30, what advice would you give her?
Don't shrink to fit into spaces you're not meant to be in.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's good.
We too often stay in cages or boxes of our own design.
Yes.
And I had many other opportunities during the time when I was leading that I did not branch out into. And while I wouldn't trade my journey for anything because it has led me here,
right?
If I could speak to my younger self, I would say, do not ever shrink to fit into a space you're not meant to be in.
That's a mic drop right there.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for joining us, Margaret White. You're amazing.
Well, so
reach out to Margaret. Thank you. And we're going to do a lot more together.
Love it.
So stay tuned. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Thanks so much for listening today. We know how valuable your time is, and that's why we keep it short and sweet. Don't forget to follow us on all the socials, and you can check out all the links and resources in the show notes. Until next time, go forth and be awesome.